While most people look at a Viking longship and see a cool wooden boat with a dragon on the front, historians see one of the most terrifyingly advanced survival tools ever engineered by human hands. These vessels were capable of cruising at 12 knots and landing in just a few feet of water, making them the medieval equivalent of a stealth bomber that could strike anywhere, anytime. They weren't built for comfort. They were built for dominance, designed to be light enough to carry over mountains yet strong enough to survive the violent Atlantic Ocean. Here is the statistic that sounds impossible. A team of skilled Viking builders could assemble one of these 60-foot war machines in just 10 hours using nothing but raw timber and teamwork. This speed wasn't magic. It was the result of a standardized manufacturing process where every warrior knew their role, turning a pile of logs into a seaworthy predator before the sun even set. That kind of precision doesn't happen by accident. It happens when an entire culture is dedicated to the art of speed, knowing that a slow ship means a dead crew. But you can't build a Ferrari out of plywood, and you can't build a longship out of just any old tree. To understand how they pulled this off, we have to go back to the forest, where the engineering began before a single axe was swung. Building a Viking ship didn't start with a blueprint. It started with a hunt, but they weren't hunting animals. They were hunting for grown timbers, trees that had naturally twisted into the exact shapes they needed. Instead of forcing a straight log to bend using steam or force, which weakens the fibers, Vikings spent days wandering the forest to find oak trees that had naturally curved roots or branches that matched the specific geometry of a ship's ribs. This natural curve meant the wood grain flowed continuously through the shape, making the part infinitely stronger than anything carved from a straight block. They used a strategic mix of timber, utilizing dense, heavy oak for the keel and structural spine to withstand the crushing force of the waves, and lighter pine for the upper planking to keep the ship fast. Finding the perfect tree was a high-stakes game because using timber with the wrong grain alignment could cause the entire ship to shatter like glass when it hit the first winter storm. It was like a giant organic puzzle where nature had already manufactured the parts, and the shipwright just had to find where they were hiding. Once the trees were marked and dragged to the shore, the real violence began. They didn't have power saws or laser levels. They had a toolkit so simple it looks primitive, yet it produced results we still struggle to replicate today. The Viking toolbox was shockingly small, relying entirely on the master craftsmanship of the user, rather than the complexity of the gadget. The MVP of the operation was the broad-headed axe, a tool so versatile that builders used it for everything from felling massive oaks to shaving delicate slivers of wood as thin as paper. They didn't saw the wood, which tears the fibers and opens them to rot. They split the logs radially with wedges and axes, following the natural grain to ensure the planks remained waterproof and flexible for decades. For the fine-tuning, they used the adze, a terrifying tool that looks like a hoe sharpened to a razor's edge, used to hollow out beams and smooth the timber. Shipwrights would swing this blade toward their own feet with a rhythmic, hypnotic cadence, knowing that a single slip in concentration would result in a severed ankle or a ruined keel. They also used the draw knife for shaving planks, and the spoon-bit auger, a hand-powered drill that required immense physical strength to bore holes through solid oak without cracking it. But here is the craziest part. They did all of this without a tape measure. How do you build a symmetrical warship using only your eyes? The answer lies in ancient chalk line technology and a lot of soot. Viking builders didn't use inches or centimeters. They used vibes, intuition, and relative proportions based on their own bodies, like the length of a forearm or the span of a hand. To create perfectly straight lines on raw timber, they would coat a string in charcoal dust or soot, pull it tight across the log, and snap it, leaving a laser-straight black line to guide their axe blades. It sounds primitive, but this method allowed them to achieve tolerances so tight that modern engineers are still baffled by the precision of 1,000-year-old wrecks. The most critical part of this eyeball engineering was the keel, the T-shaped spine of the ship that bore the weight of the entire structure. The builders spent more time shaping this single oak log than any other part, carving a slight upward curve called shear into the ends, which allowed the ship to ride over the waves rather than plowing through them. If the keel was off by even a fraction of a degree, the entire ship would twist in the water, slowing it down and making it an easy target for enemies. With the spine laid flat and level on the beach, it was time to add the bones. This is where the ship stops looking like a log and starts looking like a beast. The stem and stern posts were raised at sharp, aggressive angles, locking into the keel to create that iconic, sweeping silhouette that terrified coastal villagers across Europe. These posts were often carved from the strongest, grown timbers found in the forest, chosen specifically because their natural grain could withstand the immense hydrodynamic pressure of crashing into choppy seas. Once the ends were secure, the ribs were attached along the keel, forming the curved skeleton that would hold the skin of the ship. These ribs weren't measured with a ruler, they were carved by eye to create a shape that wasn't boxy or flat, but organic and flowing. The builders fastened each rib to the keel using hand-carved wooden dowels called tree nails, which would swell when wet, creating a joint that got tighter and stronger the longer the ship was in the water. By the end of this phase, the structure looked like the rib cage of a massive whale, bleached and waiting for its skin. Now comes the secret sauce, the specific way they applied the planks that made Viking ships faster and tougher than anything else on the water. Instead of placing planks edge to edge like later European ships, the Vikings used a technique called clinker building, where the planks overlapped each other like the scales of a fish. This overlapping design created a hull that was incredibly watertight without the need for glue or heavy caulking, relying on iron rivets clenched with washers to hold the tension. This wasn't just for aesthetics. The clinker method gave the ship a superpower that rigid boats didn't have: flexibility. When a massive wave hit a Viking longship, the hull didn't resist the force. It twisted and absorbed it, rippling through the water like a living muscle. It was essentially a primitive suspension system, where the wood itself acted as the shock absorber, allowing the ship to survive rough seas that would snap a stiff, Carvel-built vessel in half. The hull was shockingly thin, sometimes just an inch thick, making the boat lightweight enough to skim the surface and accelerate instantly when the wind picked up. The ship was now a watertight shell, capable of flexing and breathing with the ocean. But it wasn't a Viking ship yet. It needed a face, and that face was designed to do one thing: terrorize. The dragon head mounted at the prow wasn't structural. It was a weapon of psychological warfare carved from a single block of dense hardwood. These beasts were designed to strike primal fear into the hearts of enemies who saw them emerging from the fog, but they also served a spiritual purpose, scaring away the land spirits that might curse the crew. No two heads were the same. Some were snarling wolves, others twisting serpents. But all were carved with a level of detail that turned the ship into a predator. Fitting this head to the prow was a job for the master builder, a precision task that had to align perfectly with the sweep of the keel. If the head was misaligned by even an inch, the ship would look crooked and weak from the shore, ruining the terrifying aesthetic that was crucial for the Viking brand of shock and awe tactics. Once the head was pinned in place, the ship transformed from a pile of wood into a member of the crew, ready to be launched. The ship is built. It is light, it is fast, and it looks like a nightmare. But construction is only half the battle. You have a Ferrari, but do you know how to drive it? We have built a warship in record time using nothing but axes and soot. But the real magic happens when this wooden beast hits the open water. Without an engine or a metal hull, these ships defied the physics of their time, reaching speeds that allowed them to outrun news of their own arrival. The secret wasn't just in the wood, it was in the sail, the ballast, and a navigational mastery that science is still trying to reverse engineer today. You have seen how they built it, now you need to see how they used it to dominate the globe. If you want to understand the engine behind the Viking expansion and how they sailed faster than modern fiberglass boats, you need to click the next video. The Vikings didn't just build boats, they built legends. Click right here to find out how they sailed faster than modern boats without engines,